Hey everyone, Merch Hunter Ricky here, and we're talking about Pedro from One Piece. He was one of the guardians of Zou and one of their premier fighters. He was the captain of the Nox Pirates, and he accompanied the Straw Hats on their mission to Whole Cake Island to rescue Sanji. Now, Pedro specifically joined out of a debt he felt to pay Sanji. Sanji did, he cured all of the citizens of Zou of whatever Jack's poison did to them. And, well, not Sanji, but, Chopper. But Sanji was the one who found them first. So, anyways, Pedro is a lot different than just about every other character who has had a foreshadowed or just straight up death in the series. Pedro is built different in many different ways. And for the most part, characters like Gold Roger and Hero Look, they chose their own death. Like the moment they were going to die, they chose that specifically, right? However, if they didn't, they would have died within a year or a couple days, respectively, of their deaths. Of their own deaths, right? Gold Roger was on death's door with that disease. Hero Look was within probably hours, if not days, of death from the mushroom Chopper fed him. However, Pedro is in a different category altogether, because although he had about 50 years of his lifespan stolen by Big Mom, he still would have lived, roughly 10 more years or however long Minks live. People in One Piece are known to live an exorbitant amount of time, and although, like I said, 50 years is 50 years, Pedro did, he wouldn't have necessarily had like less than a couple months to live. I assume he would have had at the most 10 more years max. And, you could have enjoyed those 10 years. But Pedro saw something different in Luffy and the Straw Hats in general. Now, let's go back to the moment he came to Toddleland the first time. It was a very foolish decision, but we can see why he did it, because Big Mom had a grip on the world, especially in her part of it, and he wanted to free the citizens, or at least get the information off that poneglyph to the hands of Zou, because they already had their own poneglyph, and that means that whoever would come and assume the mantle as the true ally of the Kozukis, and, the allies of the Minks as well, those would be the ones to, lead the world into a new dawn. And we saw, as Pedro was forced to take a what would you call this? He was punished by Big Mom, right, for taking Baron Tamago's eye and breaking into Whole Cake Island in general. This cost his companion Zeppo, the older brother of Beppo, his life. Like straight up, she took all the remaining years of his lifespan and killed him. But Pedro, seizing the moment and seizing an opportunity to at least ensure he made it to the start of the new dawn, ripped his eye out to match Baron Tamago's missing eye as well. This appeased Big Mom, and she went from 70 years to 50 years. So luckily, he was able to live a little bit longer until he would one day meet the Straw Hats. And genuinely, I always bring these up in my videos, people who have met Roger before, they have to have noticed Kid Shanks wearing that straw hat. And people who have met Roger who have also met Luffy, and they don't mention it, they had to have noticed the straw hat on Luffy's head. This is for people like Granny Kokoro. Shaki mentions the straw hat, but people of that caliber who they're very integral to the story, and they're like a sleeper character because you don't realize it until you go back and see them. Pedro's impact on the series is something that has forever changed the way I view One Piece. There are very few moments in One Piece that completely change my viewpoint on the series. For those who are caught up, what we are experiencing with Kuma right now is one of those moments, for example. But Pedro, for me, just entirely built different character because he preserved what life he had left until the moment he knew he needed to expend it. And the way that he went about Whole Cake Island with the Straw Hats was crazy to me. I mean, like, the first time he met Pudding, he put a sword through her throat and was like, let's off her right now. This will increase our chances of survival. Dude was ready. Man on fire. Man on a mission. When he and Brooke were in disguise back up against the wall and talking about Brooke saying, hey, Pedro, would it be rude for me to ask you to be bait? And Pedro's like, that's exactly what I was thinking. That part really changed me because that showed right then and there is when Pedro started foreshadowing his own death to us fans. You know, there are many times where he said, I'm under no illusions here. I'm not coming out alive in this island. Like, I know what I'm doing coming back to Whole Cake Island, and I know what risks I'm taking being here, and I'm here to do it. This is my moment. When Pedro was a child, he met Gold D. Roger, and Roger told him, hey, I know you want to join my crew, but you can't. Everyone has their turn, though, and one day you'll get yours. And this influenced Pedro for the rest of his life, and it changed him to understand the value and meaning of making decisions is what really like makes me like Pedro. Because if after this, everything you see Pedro do now takes on a different meaning. Even training Carrot, getting her out of the cruel tutelage of Sicilian, who was literally just beating on her and telling her she sucks with a sword, whereas Pedro saw an opportunity to get a brand new fighter, and it's implied he made that weapon for her, the paw gauntlet, and genuinely it's one of my favorite weapons in the series. I have a whole video on it. But what I'm saying is Pedro's decisions always go to someone that's going to lead the Dawn. I genuinely think if he did not pass away, he would have become the new king of the Mokomo dukedom and not Carrot as the queen. But it's okay because Carrot carries the will of Pedro. And what's important about that is she is now built different because she experienced Whole Cake Island and the moment of Pedro's death. And although she did not do the best at the raid on Onigashima, not everybody can shine. Not everyone can have their moment in the sun, and not everybody gets their turn when they think it's their turn, right? This is an important lesson because this is exactly what Pedro was talking about. Really quick, if you could subscribe and maybe give me a like and a comment down below, that would be very much appreciated. Now back to the video. Like I said before, he is someone that, despite having a foreshadowed death, he picked his moment. Because although he was trapped under the candy, what did he do? He turned the tables. He flipped the situation. He had his explosives. Mid-editing Ricky here, and I just want to talk about really quick that during Pedro's death scene, they play to the grand line, which is, you know, the song of songs in One Piece to indicate a grand adventure on the way. But for Pedro, it symbolized something deeper than that, and I feel that deeper meaning is about him picking his turn finally and actually fulfilling the will of Roger. Just a quick thought. I think Hiriluk blew himself up too, right? But regardless, what blew my mind is that even in the past, Pedro was using the explosives. Like, that's just part of his fighting style now. He always knew that that was something he would need one day. And I think that's kind of crazy. When he whooped out the dynamite vest on Perospero, I was just catching up to Whole Cake Island, and I think they were in Act 2 of Wano in the manga. And I was floored. I was absolutely stunned by the explosion. And, you know, hey, Carrot, goodbye. You know, when he had her against the Sunny and he was talking to her about, you'll see how important it was to make sure Luffy and his friends escape from here, whatever his exact words were. I knew in that moment something big was going to happen. Now, I did not see Pedro dying. I didn't think that would happen. But when it did happen, I was completely floored. I genuinely thought he would be the next Straw Hat. I genuinely did. And yes, I was reading Whole Cake Island while it was already completed, but I hadn't read it yet. So while I was catching up, the whole time I'm like, oh man, Pedro has Straw Hat written all over him. Like, this guy, he's different. He's just so cool. I wonder how many times I've said different in this video. But anyways, he just has everything that a Straw Hat is meant to be, right? Even tragic backstory, or at least tragic moment in their backstory that changes them to who they are today. And that's why I think Pedro was built different than everyone else who died in this series. You know, Ashura and Izo, amazing and very tragic deaths. However, those deaths were not chosen, and those deaths were definitely not planned. Unfortunately, those men made the choice to sacrifice their life in the moment because they knew they had no other choice. Pedro, like, he was waiting, if that makes sense. Like, he was waiting all of Whole Cake Island. Like, he just knew that this was his dark cloud. This was his final day. This was his last adventure, his last voyage, whatever you want to call it. Pedro knew that, sorry, my fan just turned on and it's like blowing right in my face. But anyways, this was one of those things that Pedro knew. He went about all of Whole Cake Island just kind of being a menace, a general menace, and not wasting moments and actions. It genuinely, like, I haven't seen a character like that since him. I have not seen a character do the things they did the way Pedro did the things he did. Now, I wish he made it to Wano. I wish he was at the Raid on Onigashima. I wish he was one of the people that stabbed Kaido along with the Ayakaza 9. But at the same time, I am honored to have read through the whole story of Pedro and have been impacted the way I was by a guy like that. Pedro wholeheartedly is a character that I admire and one of my favorite characters in the entire series. He has created an everlasting impression on someone, and when Luffy thought about him while fighting Kaido going into Gear 5, I had chills running down my spine, I tell you. I had tears running down my face because you better put that respect on my man Pedro's name. And in the latest episode of the anime, it's not really spoilers, Zoro goes to Yasui and Pedro's graves in the woods and pours them a couple drinks, but they really focus on Yasui's and not Pedro's, which kind of made me sad, but it's okay. Because you know what? Pedro is the reason that the Straw Hats escaped Whole Cake Island. Yes, they had help. Yes, the Sun Pirates also did their thing, but none of that would have mattered if Katakuri got his hands on Luffy on the deck of the Thousand Sunny. It would have been a done deal. It would have been an absolute wrap because Luffy would not have been able to focus, right? Pedro ensured with his life that many things would happen. One of those would be that Carrot would become a stronger warrior and a leader. Maybe he didn't foresee her becoming the future queen of the Mokomo Dukedom, but he knew she would be the next leader of the Guardians once he passed. And that's what I really think he intended for her. But that's okay, because she got to come up. A W for the will of Pedro. And everyone else that he saved, Nami, Jinbei, Chopper, Brook. And Chopper and Brook specifically got very close to Pedro. And specifically, Brook and Pedro have one of my favorite panels in the series with their backs up against the wall and he asked Pedro to be bait. Just the way it looks in general, it's just one of my favorite panels of all time. But again, Pedro was built different. He was a man that chose his moment because he waited for that. He's actively sought it out and he knew that he would be able to do what he needed to do to make sure the Straw Hats left Whole Cake Island safely because he had a plan to die. Not that he went there to commit suicide, but he knew that at some point he would be the only one to understand the severity of Big Mom's army. Also, really quick for the end of the video, his fight with Baron Tamago, extremely clean. He was using like Tails move from Sonic, just like spinning his tail around, using it to alter his momentum and stuff. He had like a non-canon attack in the anime called like Beast Sword. All around, Pedro was an awesome fighter, just a great character. Anyways, that's the whole video. I love Pedro, genuinely one of my favorite characters in the series, and he was built different. Anyways, I'm Merch Hunter Ricky. I hope you guys have enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you haven't, like if you haven't, drop a comment if you agree with me, and have a good day, everyone.